I'm recording and you can. All right, we're both recording.
Okay. Yes, yes, most certainly. So, Professor Sam Vaknin, welcome to the Digital Mind Melt.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank
I,
you for having me. Please call me Sam. It will make it a more efficacious.
yes, 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 most certainly. So you are the author of Malignant Self-Love, and you went to university at the age of 9.
I started
And
my, yes, I was sent to university at the age of 9. Not a very good idea because I was taken out of my peer group. But at the time, there was this hysteria about um, um, gifted children and so on and so forth. And the belief was that gifted children should be removed from school to an academic setting because at school they would be bored and then they would become troublemakers and it would lead to antisocial behavior. That was the idea at that time.
okay,
So I and a few others, we were removed at age 9 and we were sent to the Technion, which is Israel's foremost polytechnic university. And I studied there for 9 years.
quite interesting, quite interesting. And then you wrote your PhD thesis on pronoun field theory,
Yes.
and right. I mean, probably you were a teenager, or?
No, I wasn't actually a teenager. I was 20. I got my doctorate at the age of 23. I
Okay.
I made a break. I went to business and I did very well in business. I did so well that I became addicted to money, and so I spent something like 10 years in the business world. And so these were 10 lost years as far as academic accomplishments, attainments go. And then I returned to academia and I
Interesting.
completed my doctorate at 23.
Oh, I see. I see. Could you please expand a bit on what led you to the interest in your business ventures, and what were you kind of interested in that duration of 10 years?
Money, traveling, luxury. I made a lot of money. I had a private jet and I was a kid.
Wow.
And so I got lured in and baited by the luxuries and the hedonistic lifestyle that became available to me. It's very tempting, and the academic or intellectual world is as thrilling and as adventurous as anything the external world can offer, but it is usually mired in poverty and I mean, even if unless you are an extremely prominent intellectual, public intellectual, and so on, and at the same time a good businessman who you monetize your fame and celebrity in many ways, you merchandise yourself. Unless you are this type, most academics that I know, including absolute geniuses, are poor. They're simply poor. And I grew up in a slum and I have disavowed poverty forever. I decided that I will never ever be poor again. It's a kind of deformation, character deformation, if you wish. So I regard money as as a safe or secure base. And at the same time, I regard money as a sign of the universe's love for me, an expression of the universe's love, kind of. So, in my case, and in the case of many people who grew up poor, impoverished, these kind of people who were deprived of material possessions, deprived of the certainty that comes with money, deprived of constantly living in a state of anxiety and fear, hand to mouth, check to check, these kind of people grow up and they develop a pathology when it comes to money. They begin to regard money not in materialistic terms, but they begin to regard money in emotional terms. They
Like a video
form,
game?
sorry,
Like a video game where you have to get the next reward in the next level and then just the
there
next
is
one?
the element of competitive. No, I'm talking about something much more profound. They develop an emotional relationship with money. They have a love affair with money. They regard money as a maternal substitute, a mother. They regard money as proof of God's love for them or the universe's love for them. So they experience money the same way a child would experience his or her mother, you know. They get attached to money, they develop attachment. So it's much more profound than merely accumulating money or the competitive side or the ambitious side or the status or the luxury. These are the symptoms. The disease is much deeper. The disease or the pathology is emotionalizing money, beginning to have an emotional relationship with money, the same way you would have with another human being, another person. And this is why people with a lot of money also have severe difficulties in interpersonal relationships because they are already in love. They're already in love with money, so they can't be in love with people. You have to choose whether your main love is money or your main love is people, other people, your intimate partner, your children. And if you love money in the emotional sense, if you're attached emotionally to money, if you are cathected, the clinical term is cathexis, emotional, psychic investment in money, then at that point you would find it very difficult to relate to other people in a similar way because you're already committed. You're in a committed relationship. And your partner, your intimate partner is money, you know.
I kind of have to kind of probe you here a little bit, like a person as you mentioned, that who came out of the slums of Israel, isn't that the most defensive mechanism or the strategy that one must have in order to come out of it? And isn't that also kind of like human to do that? To, I
Well,
mean,
not everyone who grows up in a slum or in poverty, not everyone, actually, the majority do not develop a compulsion to obtain money, or they strive, they work hard in order to secure basic needs and to not be indigent. And yeah, that's a common behavior. But when it becomes compulsive, when it excludes other emotional attachments, when it narrows and constricts your life into a single pursuit, when you experience heartbreak when you lose money and euphoria when you make money, in other words, when you have emotional reactions, then this is a sign of pathology, simply a sign of pathology. Money, of course, brings a sense of safety. Money brings freedom. No one is underestimating the benefits of having money. But the people who pursue money obsessively and compulsively, they're not interested in money at all. The money is in the bank. They never see the money, never touch the money. Many of them don't even spend the money. I mean, they buy this, they buy that, but it's not about the money. It's about the the presence of money in their lives is a sign, if you wish, from reality or from the world or from the universe or from God, a sign that they are chosen, they are loved, they are cared for, they're safe. It's an infantile reaction. It's the way an infant would react to the presence of his or her mother. The Protestants, the Puritans in the 17th century, the guys and girls who established the United States, among others, they believed that being successful in business, making money, is a sign of God's blessing and God's grace. They said that rich people are blessed by God and poor people are shunned by God. It's a sign
it's
of
quite
God's.
opposed to,
Sorry?
which is quite opposed to the original view of Christianity, where like the doors of God are open for the poor, and
It's
it's
a,
much
it's a,
more.
it's an inversion of the message of Jesus Christ, who said that the meek shall inherit the earth, and that it would be very difficult for a rich guy to end up in heaven. He said it would be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than from a rich person to end up in heaven. So yes, it's an inversion of the original message of at that time it was not Christianity, it was a Jewish sect. So a message of that Jewish sect. It's an inversion. But it had to do a lot with the belief in predestination, Calvinism, the Calvinist belief in predestination. And so whatever happens to you in life has been predecided by God. God is God micromanages your life. So if you make money, it means that God's hand is involved. Somehow God is involved in this. And why would God give you money? Because he loves you, because he's chosen you. Otherwise, why would he give you money? It's according to the Puritan thinking, there's no other way you could have made money except with God's intervention. God needed to intervene for you to make money. But then this implies intentionality on the part of God. It means God wants you to make money. Why would he want you to make money? Because you belong to the good guys. You're an angel. So, and all this is predestined. According to Calvinism, there's not much you can do about it. It's all written in advance in the big scrolls and books of divinity. So it's the Puritan creed and Protestantism more in general were a malignant form of Christianity because Protestantism, for example, introduced narcissism into religion. What Protestantism said, Lutheranism to be more precise, what Martin Luther said, was that there's no need for mediation between you and God. You have a direct relationship with God. You can talk to God directly, you can pray to him directly, you can manipulate God somehow. You can, you have a relationship with God the same way you have a relationship with your best friend or something. And this, of course, is an extremely grandiose notion because it kind of equalizes you with God in a way. You're collaborators. There's a collusion here. You're negotiating things, you're bargaining. It's something that is, and by the way, this is also the perception of Judaism. In Judaism, you can see many of the Jewish patriarchs, for example, Moses, who constantly negotiate with God and argue with God and disagree with God. And, God changes his mind and they manipulate God and they intercede on behalf of other people with God and Abraham and Moses and all. So Puritanism is much closer to Judaism, which would have horrified Martin Luther because Martin Luther was an anti-Semite. He hated the Jews. But Protestantism is a direct extension of Judaism, much more than Catholicism. Catholicism is paganism, in effect, is kind of paganism. It includes numerous elements of pagan Rome and to some extent ancient Greece. While you can't find a trace of this in Protestantism, it's a purified religion, so-called religion. But on the other hand, Protestantism elevated the individual. And of course, here you see the impact of the Renaissance. In the Renaissance, the individual became the main agent. The individual was empowered. And so Protestantism borrowed this concept from the Renaissance because they were coterminous. They happened at the same time. They cross-fed intellectually. So Protestantism is the religion of the individual. Exactly as Renaissance was the philosophy of the individual, exactly as liberal democracy is the politics of the individual, exactly like capitalism is the economic activity of the individual. The individual became the organizing principle of everything.
Right.
And
Right.
it was a short step away from this to narcissism and malignant individualism. Because if you are the agent, if you're the center, if you're the most important thing, if everything revolves around you, then, why not feel godlike? Why not, And that's how narcissism actually started, the modern version of narcissism. That's exactly how it started. A confluence of the Renaissance, capitalism, and Protestantism, as Weber had described in his work about the Protestant work ethic. So this is how I see the historical emergence of narcissism. Now, of course, with the aid of technology, narcissism is taking over. And not individualism, not even the Renaissance version of individual, not even the God-chosen individual, but the individual as God, the individual as God, empowered totally, apotheosis, divinity. The individual is now a deity, and narcissism is the first distributed religion. It's a religion that reflects, of course, the technological metaphors of the time. So the technological metaphor nowadays is the network. So narcissism is a network religion because every narcissist is simultaneously a god and a worshiper. The narcissist worships his false self. The false self is the narcissist's primitive god. And the narcissist is at the same time the false self. There's a merger. The narcissist is the false self and also worships the false self. So every narcissist is a god and a church and a cult. So you have like 8 billion narcissists, let's say, and so you have 8 billion gods. Polytheism is restored, 8 billion gods, and they worship themselves and they try to convert you. It's a missionary religion because they try to convert you. They want you to admire them. They want you to worship them. So a narcissist would try to convert you to become a believer. It's a new faith. And this is the religion of the future. That's the religion of the future. I think the two religions that will survive in the future would be Islam and Narcissism, basically. Masquerading, narcissism masquerading as Christianity is, but essentially narcissism. And Islam. The alternative is Islam, and it
So
has
why
its
do
own interesting features and so on and so forth. I don't know if you want to go into it. It's up to you. You're the boss. But
maybe sure, sure. Maybe there I would love to probe you there, but like first I want to kind of get into some of the
yeah.
my reflections on what you just mentioned because it was quite provoking on some certain grounds. Like I you so you were in jail once when you read about the whole structure and framework of narcissism. Almost you mentioned it was like Hollywood movies that you smuggled books in jail and it was quite romantic in a certain manner. So and you also said in one of your talks that if you are goal oriented, this is an orientation that will guarantee failure. Only the only reason to improve yourself is yourself. Nothing external, not money, not your mates, children, not your nation, but you, right? So I guess my question is much more rooted into the mediation aspect of things, like in a to form a constructive solution to this problem. Because I personally have went through some of these species called narcissists, like you define, right? And like at first, I totally trusted them because I was fooled, honestly. And I think that this is kind of like a human nature to trust also. And they were so well done. I mean, the act was done perfectly. But then the switch of the character when it came to me, it was very difficult to digest at first, right? So, are we doomed, or is there like some hope there? How do you see that? Because in the business sense, we all have to team up and work together essentially to form some common goals, right? But if a company or a corporation is full of narcissists, and what about a Socrates? What about a Plato in there? Or maybe a Jimi Hendrix, right?
Mm.
Um, like I think they're done. I mean, so I would love your thoughts on this part a little bit. Like,
First of all, what to you and me might be an evolution or a revolution to the new generations will be the new normal. They would say nothing strange about it, nothing outstanding. Every transformation leaves leaves one generation baffled and perplexed, and the other generation indifferent and insouciant because uh, narcissism is becoming the organizing principle of modern societies and modern cultures. Narcissism is not only an organizing principle, but it is hermeneutic principle. In other words, it has explanatory power. You can use narcissism or the concept or the percepts of pathological narcissism to make sense of your life. You've just done this. You've exactly did this right now. because you said you applied your knowledge of narcissism, such as it is, to your interactions with specific people. So it made sense. Narcissism made sense of your life. So narcissism
Yes.
has a lot of power to organize life, to structure it, to introduce order, predictability. Um, Even to some extent, narcissism is normative. There are norms associated with narcissism. You may disagree with them. You may find them antisocial and abrasive and so on, but there are norms. Narcissism is normative. And narcissism has explanatory power. So someone who's born nowadays, someone who's born today, would, would be growing into a narcissistically infused environment. The political leaders are narcissists, people in entertainment and show business are narcissists, chief executive officers of companies are narcissists. Narcissism is a positive adaptation in the sense that the more narcissistic you are, the more you are rewarded and accomplished and so on. And so children who are born today would regard narcissism as a natural aspect of human interactions and a foundational cornerstone of postmodern society and culture. They would see nothing strange in it, nothing deviant, nothing pathological. They would maybe regard empathy as a kind of weakness, the way Elon Musk suggested. They would regard um, altruism and charity as wasteful, a wasteful misallocation of resources. They may even opt for eugenics and worse.
No.
In other
Okay.
words, what to you and me appears to be an aberration or an innovation or a transformation or a revolution or whatever, to someone born today, in 20 years' time, would appear to be the normal thing. And everything else would appear to be aberrant and deviant and so on. So in psychology, we don't believe in dividing mental processes into right and wrong, good or bad. I'll give you an example. I would ask you, do you think depression is a bad thing? And you would answer in all probability, yes, depression is a bad thing. But in all probability, of course, you can, if you work very hard and if you spend the next 2 hours thinking about it, you may come up with a single situation where depression is a good thing. But by and large, grosso modo, depression is considered to be a bad thing. I know that it is considered to be a bad thing because we medicate against it. We're trying to mitigate it somehow. However, that is not true. It's not a bad thing, and it's not a good thing. In Auschwitz, in a concentration camp,
Yes.
if you were
Yes.
not depressed, then you're mentally ill. Depression in Auschwitz is a healthy response, is the right response. So it depends on context. Narcissism in the world I was born into was counterproductive, destructive, dysfunctional. Narcissism in the future would be a positive thing, a positive adaptation. It would add to people's self-efficacy, maybe even bring them happiness. It all depends on the context. So the focus should not be, in my view, on narcissism or on narcissists, but the focus should be on our changing civilization. Everything in human nature is ultimately reactive. Everything in human biology is ultimately reactive. We're all reacting to changing environments. Narcissism is not a coincidence, an incident, or an accident. It's an adaptation. And the more the civilization changes, the more the adaptation becomes positive. So, in a civilization which values competitiveness, ambition, worthlessness, callousness, disempathy, selfishness, malignant individualism, as I call it, and so on. In such a civilization, it's very not helpful to not be a narcissist. So in 2016, in July, the important science magazine, New Scientist, had a cover story. And the cover story read, Parents, teach your children to be narcissists. So narcissism in the discourse outside clinical psychology, narcissism is a value judgment. Saying narcissism is bad, is horrible, should be eradicated, should be fought against, should be resisted. And so, this is not psychology, this is religion. This is morality. It's a morality play. Narcissists are all bad, so that makes us all good. It's bad versus evil. It's the oldest story in the book. But that's not how psychology regards narcissism. In every single narcissist, pathological narcissism was a positive adaptation in early childhood. It allowed the child to survive and to function and to grow up. So
Right.
narcissism, pathological narcissism starts off as a survival strategy and a coping strategy. And then it is carried on into adulthood. Let me put it to you in a simpler way. Imagine that Donald Trump comes to me and I tell him, Don, we are like good friends. Don, listen.
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
Don, listen, I tell him. I have diagnosed you with narcissistic personality disorder. And that's really seriously bad news for you because narcissistic personality disorder is almost psychosis. It's really bad. It's self-defeating, self-destructive. It involves fantasy, dysfunctional defenses. It destroys your interpersonal relationships. It's poison. You need help. You need treatment. Donald Trump would say, why do I need treatment? I've had the most beautiful women on earth. I'm a multi-billionaire. I am a twice elected president of the United States. If you are right, and I do have narcissistic personality disorder, it's the best thing that has ever happened to me. It allowed me to accomplish everything I've accomplished. It made me the man that I am or the person that I am, a super hyper accomplished person. What incentive would Donald Trump have to treat his narcissism or to abolish it? None. Nor would I offer it to him. He is happy-go-lucky and he is super functional, more than most people.
Mm, mm.
So
Is it that part of the DSM that you're referring to, that if one is functional, then I don't have a say in it, essentially? Like
it's not
that's
only in the DSM, but it's the philosophy of clinical psychology that if the patient satisfies, or potential patient, the client, satisfies two conditions. One is essentially egosyntonic. Egosyntony means you're comfortable with who you are, you're happy or content with your life, you are not complaining about anything, everything is fine. Condition number one. Condition number two, that you function well, reasonably well, as could be expected, in a variety of settings. At the workplace, in family, church, neighbors, colleagues, friends, and so on. If you function well and you're happy with who you are, why would we intervene? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would we intervene? Even take a psychotic person. A psychotic person, someone who has psychosis, hallucinations, hears voices, sees things that are not there, totally divorced from reality, is hyper-reflexive. Hyper-reflexivity means he misidentifies internal objects with external objects, the internal with the external. He confuses. So this is the ultimate devastation in mental illness, like psychosis, schizophrenia. That's the worst you can get. But there are cultures and societies, and there are periods in history where psychotic people were considered the elite because there was a belief that they are in direct contact with God.
right, 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 right.
These are the people who established all religions, no exception.
This is also prevalent in many Indian cultures. Like, I mean, a lot of people, like, for instance, Ramakrishna Paramhansa is one of the saints where I come from in Calcutta, India. And I think a modern psychiatrist would call him completely insane. And but he was way more functional than many. So,
And
which is
in many societies and cultures, these people are admired, they're revered. So they're revered as prophets, as, And
yes,
so psychosis in itself is not something you need to treat. It depends crucially on how the person is coping with the psychosis and
what
how,
about pain?
sorry?
What about pain? For instance, if I may just like, I mean, probe into the part of depression, like you mentioned. Like I know that like yesterday you had a video on BPD, and I just want to kind of like that's why I take another illness, like for instance, let's say bipolar depression, which is also 2% of the world like kind of have it. And but there are certain amounts of pain associated with the patient, like they have go through periods of mania where it's becoming like they're going super fast or something like that, and then there is depression when they feel they can't wake up from their bed. This pain is very real. This is a real
Well,
phenomenon.
I've just said you need to satisfy two conditions. One is that you're happy. So you can't have pain and be happy.
Sure. Mm.
First condition is to be happy. Second condition is to be functional. Both of them. You need to have both of them. If the person is both happy and functional, no need for treatment of any kind. But the person needs to be happy. Of course, a person who is in pain but functional needs treatment. A person who is not in pain is happy but dysfunctional needs treatment.
I see.
But a
I
person
see.
who is happy and functional does not need treatment, regardless of the diagnosis, does not need treatment. These are the tests. So, as you said, there is a psychotic there, and he's a guru, and it's super functional and everything. Why would we treat someone like that? There is a narcissist, probably a malignant narcissist, and he's the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. Why would we treat him? There's another narcissist. He's president of the United States. Why would I treat him? How can I improve his life? I don't understand. He accomplished everything he ever wanted. He's happy. He thinks he's great. In which way would I improve his life?
Yeah. 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 Maybe we can just like switch a little bit of gears on the diagnostic side, and also regarding how the centralized medicine exactly takes in mental disorders and categorizes them and then defines criterion of diagnosis and then treatment. Like, why don't you like, I mean, tell us a little bit about regular depression, bipolar disorder, and the very fact that like, I mean, from what I have learned is that like there are certain kind of illnesses on which you don't have a solution. You just can manage some of this stuff. So like what are your viewpoints on on where centralized medicine is talking about, and then they keep you on a certain kind of medication routine for like a maintenance medication routine, and how would you reflect on that?
First of all, clinical psychology and clinical practice are mostly geared to tackle with the problems of mentally healthy people. So mentally healthy people go to therapy because they suddenly are depressed but overall, these are mentally healthy people. Mentally ill people rarely go to therapy. Most of them tend to deny their condition, reframe it somehow. Re- and so they rarely attend therapy. And when they do attend therapy, it's in coercive settings, in a mental asylum, or they were sent by the court, or they are in prison, or their wife is threatening to divorce them, so they attend therapy, or something. So it's coercive when it comes to mental illness. Not, I wouldn't generalize. I wouldn't say that 100% of mentally ill people, but
Sure, sure.
it's pretty prevalent. The people who do go to therapy, the people who do attend therapy are mentally healthy. The same way that you go to a doctor when something's wrong with you, but most of the time you're okay. You don't go to a doctor most of the time. You would go to a doctor because something has changed, something is wrong. So that's point number one. Point number two, the overwhelming vast majority of mental health mental illness or mental health conditions have no cure or solution of any kind. The best we can do is modify behaviors to some extent. We can do this in borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder even. We can modify some behaviors. We can use pharmacologic agents, drugs. We can use them to control moods, usually, and to eliminate the symptoms of psychosis. These are the two great achievements of psychopharmacology: mood control, and also we have certain medicines that can affect ADHD and similar neurobiological conditions. But when you look at the big picture, it's dismal and abysmal. We have no solutions, no techniques, no cures, no medications, no kind of treatment modality or talk therapy that is efficacious with almost anything. So psychotic people, they should take antipsychotics for the rest of their lives. And the antipsychotics essentially zombify them. They become zombies. People with bipolar disorder can medicate against the mood swings or the cycle, the mood cycling, the mania and depression. Can prevent the manic phase and ostensibly help with the depression. But it's also for life. It's also for life. All the others, ADHD, they can take stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin, and that's more or less it. This is why there's a huge excitement with psychedelics, like
Yes, I was
ketamine.
just going to ask you about
Yes,
psychedelics
there's a huge
because
excitement because maybe we found the antibiotics of the mind. Maybe we finally came
yes,
across a class of substances that can effectively medicate against depression and anxiety and personality disorders. And maybe we found finally the biochemical molecular key that we've been looking for so long.
yes. We were talking about psychedelics, and it's a very interesting topic which I really wanted to discuss with you because I have been studying a little bit about this because now it's a very hot topic in academia, and everybody's speaking about psychedelics, magic mushrooms, then
Ketamine,
again.
psilocybin, yeah.
Yes. What are your thoughts on psychedelics? And like, there must be some kind of fashion with which, like there was a time when we couldn't solve a lot of problems, like let's say typhoid, right? And other kind of physical diseases which we had no clue about, and people just had to die, right? Like pox, chicken pox, smallpox, for instance, polio. So, after further investigation, as time passes by, I mean, did we really hit a milestone here where we found something?
We don't know yet, but there are philosophical problems involved, which precede the question whether psychedelics actually work or not. And the first philosophical question is whether psychological illnesses, mental illnesses, are illnesses of the body. And in this sense, the mind is just an emergent phenomenon, an epiphenomenon. The mind emerges from the body. So if you treat the body, indirectly you're treating the mind. In other words, this school of thought in psychology, the medical school, believe that there is no such thing as mind, that everything is the body, that we call it the mind because we have a direct experience of it. We introspect, we have consciousness, and so on. But actually, what we call the mind is just our internal experience of 100% bodily processes. So if these are mere body processes, then yeah, we could conceivably find medications and drugs which would eliminate, eradicate mental illness because they would be able to affect the bodily processes that give rise to mental illness. And this is one approach. The other approach is the dualistic approach. And it's an approach that says that psychological illnesses and conditions cannot be reduced to the body. They are non-reductible, they're non-reducible. While the first attitude is a reductionist attitude, the second attitude is non-reductionist. So it says that psychological processes are inherently distinct from bodily processes. Psychological processes happen in the body, they occur in the body. They also use the body as hardware, and the body is wetware, and the body is software, but they are distinct from them. In which way they are distinct? That's a problem that has not been solved yet. There's no answer to that. And since Descartes in the 16th, 17th century, there's still a huge debate. The mind-body problem,
Mind-body.
there's still a huge debate about the ostensible connections between body and mind. Is there such a thing as mind, and so on and so forth? And so we need to resolve this philosophical conundrum before we answer the question whether any class of medications can actually eliminate or help with mental illness. The second problem we have is a problem of correlation and causation. We know that mental illness is highly and closely correlated with processes which are neurobiological. We know that. We know that when you have borderline personality disorder, you have brain abnormalities. When you have antisocial personality disorders, when you're a psychopath, your brain is very different. We know that in bipolar disorder, there's a biochemical cascade in the brain, which we have identified fully. So we know that schizophrenia, of course, depression even, although in depression lately there's a big debate whether we got it completely wrong. But
how is that?
there's a big debate because we discovered that serotonin is not associated with depression as we used to think. So all this class of serotonin reuptake inhibitors, I mean, probably is based on a misconception completely, and it's probably a placebo effect. But going back to your question, so we know that there is a correlation between mental states and bodily processes, but we don't know what is the connection between them. For example, we know that the psychopath has a brain that is substantially different to the brain of a healthy person. But we don't know whether the psychopath is born with such a brain or whether the brain of the psychopath is altered or changed by the psychopathy. So we don't know if a lifelong of psychopathy maybe changes your brain dramatically, because we don't test the brains of newborns. We don't test the brains of toddlers and infants. We don't do that. And so we have zero information about what kind of brain the psychopath is born with. We have a lot of information about the adult brain, the brain of the adult psychopath, but not about the brain of the child who would become a psychopath later in life. One main reason, of course, is we cannot predict. We cannot predict which baby will become a narcissist, which baby will become a psychopath. So there's no point in testing the total population. So it's a big mess. This problem of correlation and causation is a very serious hindrance or obstacle, because if there is no causation, if the bodily processes just reflect underlying psychological processes, but they don't cause them, then no drug and no medicine would have any long-term impact or healing impact or cure, will never become a cure. Because if the bodily processes do not cause the mental processes, then changing the bodily processes will not change the mental processes. If, however, whatever happens in the body causes the mental states and the mental illness, then of course changing the body using medications will change the mental illness, will affect it. So we need to resolve these philosophical conundrums long before we tackle the issue of whether this particular drug or that particular drug would be the magic bullet or the panacea. More specifically to psychedelics, there are strong indications that psychedelics would be useful in depression and anxiety.
Mm.
There are some indications that psychedelics allow people to gain experiences which are otherwise blocked. So, for example, we know that people with narcissistic personality disorder who have consumed ketamine and other psychedelics, psilocybin, we know that they have experienced empathy, and probably for the first time in their lives, they've experienced empathy. This is an experience that is blocked, that is not available to someone with narcissistic personality disorder. So the psychedelics allow them to experience things that they would otherwise never experience. But to generalize and say that this is a magic cure and we have found the solution to all mental illnesses, we are extremely far from that. And there are many reasons. In some countries, psychedelics are illegal, outlawed.
Sure.
In other countries, the problem is the protocol. We still don't know what are the optimal quantities, how long they should be taken, whether it's a lifelong thing, so you need maintenance sessions all the time, whether it's a one-off, what are the mechanisms, the brain pathways and which neurotransmitters and neuromodulators are involved. We are at the very beginning and inception of this field. And the inflated, hyperbolic, grandiose claims made even by neuroscientists, they reflect very poorly on these people. They're not serious. These people are not serious. Unfortunately, in modern day science, in current science, contemporary, people want to become famous. They want to become celebrities, even scientists. So scientists exaggerate, they lie, they falsify, they go into hyperbole, they make unfounded claims and statements. It's a sorry sight. The situation is really, really bad. You have a psychologist conducting a study of 12 people, and then he comes out with bombastic statements about a mental health condition that has been studied for 150 years. 12 people, study of 12 people. You have a neuroscientist who studies 30 people, 30, and makes claims about the brain and the connection of the brain to this and to that and how it's going to change and solve the. You have the same phenomena in biochemistry and the same phenomenon. And today, the drive to make money, to become famous, an instant celebrity, an influencer, and so on is so strong that it has completely corrupted and contaminated science, completely. And you cannot trust what scientists say today. You absolutely cannot. I grew up in an environment where I trusted scientists as if they were gods. A scientist said something, end of story. I believed. I believed the peer review. I believed all the rigorous controls. I believed the falsifiability of the theory. I knew that there were checks and balances that would prevent. But today, I can't trust. So when new studies come out, I bother to download them, to go through all the methodology, that how many people were involved in, and something like 90% of the time, I find trash. Indeed, in psychology, 80%, 80% of the results of studies cannot be replicated. This is known as the replication crisis. They cannot be replicated because they were trash to begin with.
I think 85% of the papers from humanities were never even cited once. One of the studies.
It's a mess, but not only humanities. No, we have a similar situation in physics. I'm a physicist. I have a PhD in physics. And I've developed my own theory in physics. You have a similar situation in physics where physicists come out with the craziest claims just to gain some exposure, to be on television, to talk to the media, or social media. And you have psychology is devolving, not evolving, but devolving into some kind of mysticism. All kinds of theories that can never be tested, can never be falsified. All kinds of nonsense, it's flooded. Physics is flooded with trash and nonsense nowadays. About a week ago, or was it 2 weeks ago, a group of scientists from Cambridge University. Cambridge University is up there, one of the 5 best in the world. I teach in an institute affiliated. So a disclaimer, I teach in a postgraduate institute in Cambridge. But still, a group of scientists from Cambridge University announced they found traces of life on an exoplanet. There's a molecule on Earth associated on Earth only, mind you, which is a limited sample, to use a British understatement. But on Earth, this molecule is associated only with life. Okay, so they claim that they found such a molecule on another planet, on an exoplanet. Immediately, there was a media circus. They went on every conceivable television all over the world. They became instant celebrities, superstars, until a team from Oxford, the competing university, had a go at their raw data and found out that it was all complete nonsense. They failed to use the most basic statistical tools, for example, significance tools. They failed to use these tools. It was trash, not science, pseudoscience. Cambridge University. Who on earth can you trust anymore? So all these studies with psychedelics are conducted outside academia, most of them, not all, but like 90% of these studies are conducted outside academia. There are no rigorous controls, no control groups in the majority of them. They're conducted on small, tiny samples, which are not representative. They're self-selecting samples. Many of these people have used psychedelics before, which is very bad news because the previous use of psychedelics may have changed their brains or conditioned them somehow. We have competing protocols. Some scientists say you need to give it once. Some scientists say you need to have maintenance sessions all the time. So we can't even compare what's happening because they don't adhere to a single protocol, which would allow replication and comparison. It's chaotic. It's a chaotic scene. Having said all this, clearly, ketamine, other psychedelics have a beneficial effect in depression and anxiety. That, I think, is established beyond doubt. Definitely, psychedelics are more efficacious in depression than antidepressants. That is, I also think, is established beyond doubt. All the other claims, anxiety maybe to some extent, I think also in anxiety. But otherwise, I think all the claims are inflated, hyperbolic, and unsubstantiated. At this stage, I'm a great believer that psychedelics can be a change agent, a transformative agent. Because I think if a narcissist experiences connection to another human being, even once, it could have a beneficial impact, long term. I believe that, but it's a belief. And belief has no place in science. It's not a scientific statement, what I say.
What about an engineering kind of an attitude towards it? Like, for instance, so far, on this theme that we are discussing, like, let's say that like there is a body aspect of it, which if we probe into something and we get something out there, and sometimes it works, sometimes like we just understood that the whole depression phenomenon with serotonin was a placebo. And then there is a mind aspect of it. Like there have been miracles where people have changed radically over a very short period of time just by the power of the mind, right? And
I don't know what to tell you. This is a foundational debate in psychology. There's a medical school or medicalization school, which started with Wundt and even Freud. Freud was a kind of medical guy. He was a neurologist and so on, and he believed that there is a mechanics of the mind, a physics of mind. That's why he called it psychoanalysis. So you have this psychoanalysis is essentially a medical school, because in psychoanalysis you have energies, and the foundational concept of psychoanalysis is energy. You have psychic energy, and this psychic energy is discharged and accumulated, and so it's all a very physical model. It's a physical model. And you have the non physical or non medical approach, which says that psychological processes are so complex that even if they are connected to bodily processes, we would never, or it would take a long time before we are able to reduce them to bodily processes. It's a little like genetics. In genetics, a single gene, in the vast majority of cases, has zero impact. But if you take an array of genes, if you take like 50,000 genes or whatever, then you get something. You get blue eyes, you get, whatever. Everything you see in a human body is the outcome of a collaboration between multiple genes. It's extremely rare for a single gene to manifest. Usually in disease, you have single genes there. So it shows you that the normal state is a collaboration between multiple genes. Only when you are diseased, when you're sick, something's wrong with one gene. So the same way you can view the mind. The mind is the synergetic outcome of a collaboration between dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of processes, molecules, and pathways in the body. Are we in a condition right now? Are we in a state that we can identify all these thousands of collaborating and colluding components and ingredients? No, we are extremely far from that. For example, until very recently, we were not aware that the vast majority, the biggest quantity of serotonin is not produced in the brain, but in the intestines.
The gut. Okay.
Yeah, it's new. It's a new discovery. So what do we know? We are nothing. We're ignorant. Until recently, we were not aware that spinal fluid cleanses the brain every night. We were not aware of that. There is an irrigation system, a sanitary system that cleanses the brain. And when this fluid passes through the brain, you dream. That's when dreams occur.
Right.
We were not aware of that. We didn't know that until 10 years ago. So to say, wait a minute, I know everything about depression. Depression is serotonin, or this is dopamine, or this is extremely arrogant and counterfactual. It stands to reason that something like narcissistic personality disorder, which affects emotions and cognitions, and you name it, it affects everything, behaviors, you name it. It stands to reason that narcissistic personality disorder involves everything in the body, but I mean like everything. The intestine, the gut, the brain, the spine, you name it. I think thousands of processes in the body are involved in the production, in the emergence of narcissistic personality disorder. It's what we call epiphenomenon. It emerges from an underlying substrate. Are we in a position to say that we can identify all these processes in the body that give rise to narcissistic personality disorder? Not even extremely remotely. Like we haven't even begun, So, and we have entered a territory recently. Recently, I mean in the last 20 years, but definitely in the last 5 years, where we are discovering medications and we have no idea how they work. So, for example, SGLT is a class of anti-diabetic medication. We have no idea how they work. I mean, we know what they do, but we don't know how they do it. Similarly, the famous drugs, Ozempic, and the drugs for
lithium is also one of them, right?
the weight loss drugs.
Lithium?
I'm sorry?
Lithium.
Lithium is an antidepressant, but it's no longer used because it's toxic. But we have now weight loss drugs, and we know how they work, but we have no idea how they do it. So now we're beginning to use drugs that are a bit like a casino. We know that they work, but we have no idea how they work. Consequently, we have no idea what are the side effects and what may happen in 10 years if you consume them, or 20. It's extremely reckless. The whole environment is reckless and contaminated because it's driven by money, of course. And that was the main argument against the COVID vaccines. I'm a pro-vaccine. I'm a pro-vaxxer. Don't misunderstand. I was
Right.
completely for the COVID vaccine. But to claim that we knew everything about it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do we know what are the side effects? Absolutely not. We need another 20 years. Maybe
Yeah,
then
most
we
of
will
that
know.
became extremely political after a point of
It
time.
was
Like,
political. It was also fear, terror, because COVID was killing millions of people. I mean, ultimately, when I weighed the risks of COVID with the risks of the vaccine, I said, okay, I'm pro-vaccine because there was something more dangerous than the vaccine. But the vaccine is dangerous. Of course it is. It's only less dangerous than COVID. That's all. So all this arrogance, there's a newfound arrogance, a hubris. In other words, narcissism, grandiose narcissism in science and medicine, driven by money, ambition, celebrity. It's the field is totally corrupt, totally corrupt. And that's why people, simple people, laymen, not people like me who have doctorates and access to the knowledge, but simple people, they lost trust in science. They lost trust in authorities and institutions because they're not stupid. They're simple, but they're not stupid. They see the corruption. They ask themselves questions. Not all these questions are conspiracy theories, you know? So that's a long way of telling you psychedelics look promising, but do we know anything about them? Close to zero, close to nothing. We know that they have some impact in depression and anxiety, end of story. And I'm being generous, charitable. Even that is debatable.
right, right, right. Interesting. Yes, I actually kind of also wanted to talk about your work in the chronon field theory. Um, like, but maybe before going there, like I just want to kind of let you finish the riff on the extension of psychedelics with all these ailments that we have right now talked, and the amount of pain that is already there, which is kind of very very existential, right? And all of this kind of always boils down into knowledge. Like if we have the knowledge, we will be able to solve it, and every passing day we are definitely getting some more of it, a little more of it. But we somehow don't have the basic fundamentals. Like I want to take one of the tangents from here. Like if you consider a technology like Neuralink, right? How do you exactly kind of put it in your framework? Like, for instance, if I make a thought experiment, right? Let's imagine that I have one wire in my brain, right, which is related to my vision, right? And then there is another wire related to what I hear. Then there is another wire taste, and then every single things, and it's much more complicated. And there are probably millions of these wires, right? What if I put one of these wires with one of your wires and connect them, right? And how would you see? You would see 50% of the times how I see the world and I feel the world, and 50% of the times how you feel the world, and so would I.
I doubt it very much. I think it would be possible in the future, not the near future, but in the future it would be possible, of course, to transfer data from your brain to my brain. I'm quite convinced this would be possible.
Yeah, yeah,
However,
yeah.
this data would be filtered through my emotional membranes, cognitive membranes, personal history, memories, and so on. So I could obtain your thoughts, for example. Maybe I could even obtain data about your emotions. But immediately, my defenses, my autobiography, my memories, my emotions, my resistances, my equipment will take over. It's not like computers where you can transfer data from one computer to the other and both of them would interpret the data identically because they are identical, they're clones. But we are not clones. We are not clones, not even when we are born. Now we know that when we are born with, 10% of personality already, quite a lot. templates for language, templates for emotion, recognition of faces. We immediately recognize mother's face, and so on. So we are born with equipment. And we are very, very dissimilar. And we grow more dissimilar with time to the point that we are idiosyncratic. We are unique. And so any data that will come from you would be immediately reframed, falsified, changed, transformed, rewritten, reinvented, you name it, so that I am the one who is experiencing it, not you anymore. You could, in theory, have two virgin brains. One day in laboratories, we would be able to grow brains without anything, like virgin, the equivalent of a new laptop with no operating system. And then in these brains, maybe, which have had no prior experience, we may create cloning or identical resonances so that these two brains will be actually identical copies of each other and will form a single consciousness space or memory space or whatever. This could be, I believe we will be able to do that, subject to ethical considerations and philosophical debates and so on. But technologically, I believe this would be possible. But now, with existing brains and existing bodies of existing people, it's a hopeless task to expect me to experience anything the way you do, or vice versa. A hopeless task. So, Neuralink's biggest promise is as interface with machinery, devices, and so on, and intervention, pinpointed intervention in highly specific areas of the brain. We know that if we intervene in the brain, there are behavioral outcomes, emotional outcomes, cognitive outcomes. We know that we can change how people feel, how they think, and how they behave by directly intervening in the brain. We know, for example, that if we cut the connection between the two hemispheres, something known as lobotomy, we know that depression disappears. Now, would you like to do that? I don't think so, but it's a fact.
Thank you.
We know that if we administer electric shocks to the brain, electroconvulsive therapy, electric shocks to the brain, we know that it ameliorates major depression and suicidal ideation. It eliminates them almost.
But does it also make
Electroconvulsive
you a
therapy is
zombie?
very efficient.
But
So,
does it also turn you into a zombie?
not really. This is media hype. Electroconvulsive therapy is well tolerated, and the recovery is pretty total. But lobotomy is not. Lobotomy turns you into a zombie, yes. And many drugs, antipsychotic drugs, turn you into a zombie. Absolutely. So even then, if we were to gain direct access to the brain through a Neuralink or whatever, it would raise practical questions. What price are we willing to pay in order to modify the brain, intervene in the brain, affect the brain? Are we willing to live like zombies? Are we willing to live in a matrix, for example, a delusional state? No. These would be debates that would emerge. For example, if you hate reality, and there's another 10 million people like you, they hate reality. They can't stand reality. They want to die. Maybe it's a good idea to give them a Neuralink, or to give them something to interfere and to cause them to live in a fantasy, in a delusion, which would make them happy. There is already such an intervention. It's called religion. Essentially, a delusional disorder that makes you happy, you know.
Right.
So all these questions will emerge pretty soon. I believe in 5 years to 10 years, we'll already be faced with these questions because we are entering the last frontier. The last frontier is not space. Space, we are already in space. You think there's much difference between going to the moon and going to Mars? It's only a question of time. Technology is there. We are already in space, but we are not in the brain. That's the last frontier. We are in the oceans, we are on land, we are in space. The last remaining frontier is the brain. It's a last remaining cosmic voyage. And the brain is far more complicated, like dramatically, exponentially more complicated than any known object in the universe. And than the universe in its totality except the brain, if you take out the brain. So The brain is so hyper complex. We have spent, for example, something like 5,000 years trying to decode and decipher the universe. And we've done a reasonable job at this stage. We are 25% there. Another 75% to find out, but 25% we're there probably. It took us 5,000 years. The brain is incomparably more complex. Incomparably. Orders of magnitude, huge. So it took us 5,000 years with the universe. Maybe it will take us 50,000 years to understand the brain fully. Scientists have just been able to create a map of 1 cubic centimeter of a rat's brain, the brain of a rat. 1 cubic centimeter, tiny, almost microscopic, not exactly, but tiny.
Mm.
You should see the outcome. Multiple supercomputers generating millions of pages, tens of millions of diagrams, well over 100 billion interactions a second for a total by now of 12 trillion. We are talking about 1 cubic centimeter of the brain of a rat, not a human being, not even a politician, a rat.
Right,
You
right.
understand?
Right.
That's a
Yeah,
rat. It
that's
took all our supercomputers combined to map 1 cubic centimeter of a rat. And here we go online and we say that we understand the brain and we have insight and we can do this and we can do that. How arrogant is this? How narcissistic is this? No.
yes, yes,
We don't
most
have much
definitely.
time, so I suggest to leave the Quanon field theory some other time. I'd be delighted to talk to you about it.
Most certainly, most
I think we
certainly. It
covered
was a
some
pleasure.
interesting topics here, and if we're too long, no one will watch anything. I
Sure, it was a great talk, and I really appreciate this. And I would love to, I have many more questions actually, but I know that this is not going to be possible in one go.
No,
So
it's not. We can discuss the Cronon field theory and generally the state of physics and similar issues on another talk. Not right
most
now, in a
certainly.
few weeks' time to avoid saturation, but I'm open to talk to you again. Okay?
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you for tolerating me. And where are you now? You're
It
not in
was.
Calcutta, you're in Mumbai.
No. Yes, I live in a small village in Germany called
Oh,
Ilmenau.
oh, you're in
Yes.
Germany. I thought you were in India.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I live in Germany
Oh, I
now.
saw your
Yes.
phone number. Yes, yes, Germany.
Yes.
Yes. I saw your
Yes.
phone number. You sent me a message. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. I actually did my master's in signal processing in the
Oh,
Technical University of Ilmenau.
all right.
And then I worked for about 2 years, and now I'm starting to form my own venture called Dialmate. So
All right.
yes, I mean,
Long,
I'm
long, long
quite
time
in.
ago when I was a kid,
Yes.
I
Yes.
did some work on filters, uh, on filters. Uh, Never mind.
Interesting.
It's an old story. Okay, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes. 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 Great pleasure. So have a
Take,
lovely evening then,
take care. You
Sam.
too. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.